Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minute here, and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today it is the F-80C Shooting Star in 1/72 scale from Airfix. So join me as I take a look inside the box and see what this one is like. Starting out on the front of the box, we've got this artwork, and I think it's Roy Cross. If we look on the side here, pack illustration by Roy Cross 1973. Incidentally, that's the same year the toolings date from, so it's a 1973 vintage. And I had a bit of a moment when this came through the post. It was today, actually. This came in the post today. And I had one of these in my youth. I never built it. I'm not really sure what happened to it, but I'm pretty sure at the time that the artwork had bombs dropping off of the plane. And I thought that was a Mandela effect because you can see that they're not on here. Perhaps it was something I misremembered. But it turns out that no, I was right. Previous versions of this box had bombs falling off the plane. And as you can see, they're no longer on there. So I guess we're just making things a little bit safer and nicer. But I'm glad that I had remembered correctly. So flipping on to the thin edge, we've got information about the tooling, we've got information about the actual F80, and it says here that the length will be 146mm, the width is 164, and there are 51 parts included. We've got two paint schemes included. The first one is for Sagan Dragon, which is an aircraft which was used in South Korea in 1951, and the second one, it doesn't seem to have a name for the particular aircraft. I think the first one is the more famous one, and the second one is another aircraft which was used at the time in the same theatre. Item code of A02043V. That's a big code number. So Series 2, but the V at the end stands for vintage. Humbrol paint callouts are here. Naturally, you can use whatever paints that you want to use. And Airfix flying hour here. Just the one. Cut it out, keep it. If you're a member of the club, use that to get more kits. Alternatively, send it off to Models for Heroes and help support charity. Skill level 1 down there, so Airfix reckon that this is not going to be a particularly difficult kit to build. And on this other edge, we've got safety information in different languages, a logo for cartograph, so there should be cartograph transfers in there. Just down here, it says it was made in India. The pack design was from 2022, so this is actually last year's edition, but it's still currently in the range. So let's get the box open and see what we've got inside. As you can see here, the box seems to have been pinched when someone was putting the lid on the top, but hopefully that hasn't damaged the parts inside, but we'll have a look. Looking at the instructions then, same sort of format as we expect from Airfix. Information about the actual F80 on the front. Flipping over, we have assembly instructions and a key to those symbols we're going to encounter during the build. Moving on then, we have our stages. So we've got a pilot and we can add him into our cockpit. All the colours are annotated there. And moving on into the internal areas of the aircraft, it says that we need to add 5 grams of nose weight to prevent the aircraft from sitting on its tail when we've completed it. Join the fuselage halves together and then join our wing halves together. Of course, if you want to install your fuel tank on the wingtips and your bombs and pylons, you need to open up the holes underneath. Moving on, we add our air intakes on the side of the aircraft, our canopy, tail surfaces, engine exhaust, and the wings onto the fuselage. Carrying on down, we have our landing gear leg assembly where we add our wheel hub, our wheel, and our doors. And then here we have the option of having the air brake in the open or closed position. Personally, if this is on the ground, probably would go for closed. If it was in flight, you could have it open as if it's in a dive and it's trying to slow down. Paint up the internal gear bay areas, add our landing gear parts to those areas, and then we have our bombs. Bombs come in 2 parts, and there are 2 different choices of drop tanks. I'll probably be going for these ones here. Flip over the page and it just shows you where to install them, but there is of course one last little probe which goes on the nose. That's probably the pitot tube. And then we move on to our painting instructions. So the first one, scheme A, is for Sagan Dragon. But there are some research notes down here which says information about how the Dragon stencil was only carried on the right hand side of the plane. Additionally, Airfix have gone a little bit above and beyond here. If you don't want to use the transfers included in the kit for these blue stripes, they have included artwork separately, so you can do your own painted stripes if you would prefer. Additionally, it makes points here about the wingtip tanks, about how they weren't handed, so the fuel filler was always on the left-hand side. This is probably the scheme that I would be interested in doing. Moving on to the next page, we have Scheme B, which is for an aircraft, again in South Korea in 1951, from the 36th Fighter Bomber Squadron. Not necessarily as exciting a paint scheme, generally just silver overall with a little bit of different colour, anti-glare panel on the nose and some red stripes on the tail. And again, Airfix have included separate insignia numbers here because this is a one transfer, or you can paint your own stripes and use a different insignia on the top there, which is very thoughtful indeed. It means you're not tied to doing it one way. So yeah, let me know, would you do the blue-nosed sagging dragon, or would you go for the slightly less interesting scheme of the red stripes on the tail? Moving on to look at the transfers then. So we have a moderately sized sheet of transfers printed by Cartograph. And you can see down here we've got our dragon insignia, which it comes separate. And again, it says we've got our separate ones for the other scheme here if you wanted to do your own stripes. Transfers look to be really well printed. There is good registry. I mean, Cartograph transfers, you can't really say a great deal about them other than they are generally excellent. No tears, no registration issues, generally very nice transfers. And like I say in other videos, sometimes the transfers cost as much as the plastic inside the kit. So that's what you're paying for here. You're paying for quite high quality transfers. Cartograph are some of the best in my opinion. And speaking of the plastic parts, they are all contained within a plastic bag. And unlike modern releases from Airfix, they don't come on a frame. As was quite typical at the time, they come in just a pile of bits, really. So let's get the clear parts out as well. They come in their own little bag. And we'll look at the clear parts first whilst we've got them. So the clear parts then, you have a landing light here and the canopy as well. Canopy generally not too bad. Flash is minimal. However, there do seem to be some scuffs and blemishes on the plastic, which is a bit of a shame, but I guess that's a testament to how old they are. Over time, these things occur to the toolings. Not terrible though. I think that they have been polished. There does seem to be a bit of dirt potentially on the inside, so probably worth a wash before you use it. But yeah, absolutely fine. The details are of the raised variety, so the canopy frames are quite noticeable, so that shouldn't be too difficult to mask. He says dropping it. Shouldn't be too difficult to mask if that's what you wanted to do. And then I'll put that to one side, and then the plastic parts then. So these are moulded in a light grey blue plastic, which show up quite nice on my bench. Compared to the other plastic that Airfix has been using recently, which is the dark grey, these are more noticeable on my bench. So let's take a look then at the wings. The plastic doesn't feel particularly greasy compared to other kits that I've had recently. And we can see that the mold quality is fairly decent. As to be expected, the time frame that this was manufactured, the details on there are of the raised panel line variety. They're very subtle. They're not massive. I would imagine that the F-80, being the first jet, would have had like puttied seams, so they probably weren't that noticeable on the real aircraft anyway. On the inside, we've got a little bit of pipework detail in the landing gear bay, which was probably quite a big deal at the time. And we've got a copyright date of 1974 just in the side there. If I can get that to show up on the camera, turn it around, that makes sense. There we go, copyright 1974. The lower wings here, these, same sort of deal. Mold quality, generally quite good, not much in the way of flash. Plastic is a little bit flexible, but it doesn't feel brittle. And we have some molded detail in the gear bay there. That's not bad. not a bad addition for a 1974 kit. There is some dirt or blemishes on the plastic. I don't know if the tools are particularly clean. That's not dirt that's on the surface, that's actually in the plastic. So not sure what's happened there. Perhaps the plastic was too hot and it's a mark, the colour has changed slightly because of that, or maybe there was some dirt in the mould which has resulted in the plastic changing like that. Moving on to this sprue then, we've got our fuselage half. Again, details are very subtle, the aircraft is very smooth, and generally the mould quality is quite good. No internal detail though that I can see. We've got our drop tanks, our exhausts, air intakes, nose wheel, and our bombs. Plastic is very smooth, would definitely benefit from a primer coat going down, particularly if you intended to hand paint this one. Generally though, mould quality is okay. And then moving on to the final sprue, as it were, we have the other fuselage half, tiny bit of flash down here that will need cleaning up. Again, no detail on the inside, but the mould quality is fairly reasonable. I remember having this as a child. I never built it as a child. I did look at it as a child and think that it looked fairly decent then. Obviously, it's not up to the same standard as modern toolings, but it's okay. We've got our little pilot there, a jet pilot kind of figure, not quite the same as the generic Airfix figure that we have all the time, but he looks okay. He looks absolutely usable. Was there an option for a display stand? Yeah, so back in the day, you see there's a little slot just here, if I can point at it correctly, there. And that slot would have been for a display stand, which sadly are no longer included, but it would be nice if they came back. Speaking of, I actually have, spoilers, I have this. Flip it around. I have this, and that comes with display stands. There they are, look, display stands. So, yeah, Airfix can do it, but I guess it's just a cost choice. They don't. Right, so where were we? That was it, I think. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 greyish plastic sprues, moulded to a reasonable quality. Details are a bit shallow, but what details there are passable. Would build up into a good representation of the F-80, I imagine. And then 1 clear part as well, which, again, reasonable. Some blemishes, but usable. This should build up into a fairly decent kit. And this would benefit, I suppose, if you just wanted to knock it up, because it all comes in effectively 1 colour, which is silver. Just spray can it. That's probably what I'm going to do. Just build it up, spray can it silver. So we had all of those plastic parts. We had our lovely, lovely decals from Cartograph. Absolutely fantastic. Usually no issues with decals from Cartograph. Considerably better than the transfers that you used to get from Airfix. I think I remember I've still got the transfers from the old set. I just don't know what happened to the plastic parts. I must have given them away to someone. We have our instructions, which are to the usual format from Airfix. Naturally, they have the more vintage style of instructions for the part assembly, but the painting instructions benefit from being in full colour. All of which comes contained within the Roy Cross illustrated artwork. And no, you are not going crazy. The bombs have been airbrushed or edited out of the artwork, but nevertheless it's still an attractive looking scene. So how much would you be looking at paying for one of these? Well, on the Airfix website at the moment it's retailing for £10.99, and some people might think that's a little bit steep, bearing in mind this is a vintage tooling, but don't forget that you are getting those Cartograph transfers and they are high quality, and also you're getting the choice of 2 different decal schemes to choose from, and you know, we're effectively paying for the quality of those transfers and that ability to make a choice. Compared to some of the cheaper kits, I think it was like the Fiat G50 that I've looked at from the Vintage Classic range. It was cheaper, but it was also a lot less in quality. This doesn't look too bad. With the age then, as this came from 1973, which is interesting because the mold tools were made in 1973, but we had a copyright date of 1974. So that is interesting. But yeah, since then it's been part of the Airfix range a number of times. I'm pretty sure that I had the 1997 version, probably in the early 2000s, but I never built it. So I would like to build this one and see if it would end up being as good as I thought it would at the time. But that is pretty much it. It's an old kit which should build up into a reasonable representation of the F-80. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with my assessment and you thought my review was fair. As always, quick shout out to my patrons and channel members for the extra support they give the channel. A massive thanks to these guys on screen. And if you'd like to join them, take a look at the links in the description. Down in the description as well, you'll find other ways to help support the channel, but the best way to support this channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Last thing to say though is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.